Welcome. This is May 28th. This is a 90-minute level 1 to 3 class. The theme is find your minimum edge. Come to a comfortable seat on a block or a cushion. Start with your hips where they want to be, which is in a place that allows you to avoid your hip stretch. And then slowly roll the hips forward, noticing that first beginning of a stretch sensation. And take a couple more breaths to roll your hips forward until they are in neutral position. Your spine can therefore be neutral and your breath can be free. Notice this connection between the freedom of the breath and the necessity to avoiding stretches. Sorry, let me phrase that differently. In order to free your breath, you have to stop avoiding stretching, especially your hips. And so freeing the breath is actually a good guide for figuring out what you need to be stretching. But then for this week, I want you to engage those stretches very gradually. To actually start with minimal stretches for two reasons. Because that allows you, or it compels you to bring awareness to moments in time where you're not likely to be really aware, because you're moving into a pose, you're focused on the full expression of the pose, and you're rushing through the beginning stages of that. Finding your minimum edge requires you to really be present in those beginning stages and to pause there, to disrupt this tendency to always want to rush ahead, to be more present in the moment, and to be more present while seeking out incredibly subtle sensations, noticing incredibly subtle sensations. Close your eyes, tune into your breath. And the power of this is to teach yourself to be mindful even in moments that don't seem super important. Because in the end, that's the greatest untapped potential of mindfulness, is all those moments you're not mindful at all, or any of those moments. With your next inhale, float your arms out and up and pause at minimum edge. Pause where you begin to feel the stretch. And that's well below horizontal arms, right? Next inhale, float the arms up a little bit higher. Exhale, pause. Wait for the stretch sensations to diminish, which they do if you just pause there. And then third inhale, float the arms up and exhale your hands to your heart. Let's begin with one Om. Take a slow, delicious inhale. Inhale, expand. Exhale, bow. Lower your hands to your thighs. Inhale your right arm out to the side. I'm mirroring you. Pause at minimum edge. Take 3 breaths to go to maximum. Then exhale, twist to the left. Again, pausing at minimum edge, which means you can't get your hand to the thigh yet. Exhale, deepen the twist. Left hand to the sacrum. 3 breaths to get to maximum. Inhale back to center. Left arm flows out to the side and pause at minimum edge. Notice that minimum edge has already moved farther into the pose. Third inhale, maximum. Right hand to the floor, side bend. Pause at minimum edge. Again, quite soon. Right? And exhale, deepen. Third exhale. maximum edge. Inhale back to center. Just one breath here, because there's no stretch in coming back to center, right? And then exhale, forward bend. Pause at minimum edge. Inhale, pause, free the breath, exhale. Go a little bit deeper. Inhale, pause, third exhale, full expression of the pose. Walk your hands back in. Switch the crossing of the feet. Bring the other foot in front. Inhale the left arm out to the side and up. Pause at minimum edge. Third, inhale maximum. Exhale, twist. Minimum edge. Inhale, pause. Exhale. Deepen the stretch. Inhale, pause. Back out a little bit if you want. Third exhale, maximum stretch. Inhale back to center. And right arm floats out and up. Again, notice that it goes higher, probably for you to reach minimum edge than before as you warm up. Exhale, side bend, minimum edge. Exhale deeper. And maximum. Notice I define maximum edge as the place beyond which you can no longer enjoy your breath. So that's probably earlier than what you might think of as maximum edge. It's not the place beyond which you're in absolute pain or you're going to get yourself injured. Come to table. Walk your knees back 15, 20, 25 centimeters. Curl your toes under. I'm up into a downward dog. Start at minimum edge, so intentionally rounding the back, rounding the lower back in particular, and then take your time increasing the stretch sensations, mostly through creating more neutral hip placement and thus a more neutral spine, combined with floating the hips back and releasing the heels down and straightening the legs. Inhale forward to plank. Exhale, send your heels back. Inhale, side plank on the right. Free your breath. Exhale, center plank. Inhale, side plank on the left. Exhale, center plank. Back to downward dog. And then walk your feet forward towards your hands. Lift your torso a little bit. Come into minimum edge in Uttanasana. And then take 2 more exhales to move deeper into the pose. And use your next inhale to float up, pausing at minimum edge. 2 more breaths to maximum. And exhale, swim home. Again, just 1 breath here because there is no increasing stretch in this movement. Top of the mat. Inhale, breastbone floats up. Exhale, breastbone settles again. Inhale, movements rippling out from the breath. Breastbone lifts. Arms rotate out and float up. Pause at minimum edge. Total of 3 inhales to move to maximum. Exhale, forward bend. Pause at minimum edge. And notice that that happens far above horizontal. 3 breaths to maximum. Then inhale halfway up. Again, pausing at minimum edge, which probably again requires a rather rounded back, and then take 2 more inhales to come into more neutral hips and a more neutral spine and a more spacious breath and a deeper stretch. Exhale, forward bend. Pause at minimum edge. Do right past that. Third exhale, maximum edge. Inhale, float up. Pause at minimum edge. Moving from the breath. Exhale, swim home. Keep going. Again, 3 breaths for each movement, unless I tell you to slow down even more. Exhale, forward bend. Pause at minimum edge, way above horizontal in all likelihood. Inhale, halfway up. Take 2 more inhales to free your breath. And dial up the stretch sensation. Then exhale, step your right leg back. High lunge, inhale up. Hands to your hips. Minimum edge. Again, which might mean your hips are rotating forward. Maybe the back knee slightly bent. Maybe the front knee isn't bent very much. And then exhale, tone the lower belly. Bend the front knee more, straighten the back leg more. Dialing up the stretch. Last inhale, maybe float your arms out. Maybe just to minimum edge. And then exhale, plank. Chaturanga, knees down first if you like. 1 breath for Chaturanga, there's no stretch. Cobra, 3 breaths. Inhale to minimum edge. Exhale, pause. Inhale up a little bit higher. Exhale, pause. Third inhale, maximum edge. Full expression of the pose. Exhale, downward dog. Pause at minimum edge. Take 2 more breaths. To move to maximum. Inhale your right leg up behind you. Pause at minimum edge. Take 2 more breaths. To move to maximum. Exhale the right foot forward. Inhale up. High lunge. Hands to your hips. Pause at minimum edge. And then dial up the stretches. Both on the inhales and on the exhales. Last inhale, arms float out. Maybe just to minimum edge. Exhale. Step forward. Relax the back of the neck. Minimum edge here. 3 breaths. Inhale, float up to minimum edge. Exhale, swim home. So again, notice whether you notice your minimum edge sooner or later as you get better at this. Both are possible. You might be noticing your minimum edge later because you're actually warming up and you actually are not feeling a stretch until you've moved farther into that shape. But you may also be getting better at noticing a more subtle stretch sensation. So you may be noticing it earlier because before you just didn't register that sensation as a stretch. You didn't register it at all. So either way, again, the main point is just to fine tune your awareness, to become more present, to notice more subtle things. Top of the mat, exhale, breastbone settles, inhale, breastbone floats up. Arms rotate out and float up to minimum edge. I'm going to talk less about reminding you to pause there because I want you to actually remember it on your own. And that's challenging. As you have already noticed, I've blown past a couple of them already. That's okay. As long as you notice that you've blown past them, you're still doing the work of awareness. Third inhale, and then exhale, step the left leg back. Inhale the arms out in front. Exhale, tone the lower belly, draw energy from the fingertips into the shoulders. Dial up the stretches. Exhale, add a twisting stretch, minimum edge. So we're going to do 2 more breaths here for the twist. Inhale, pause, or even back off a bit. Third exhale, full expression of the pose for you. Inhale back to center. Exhale, optional vinyasa. Remember, 3 breaths to cobra. Moving from the inside out. Moving from minimum edge to maximum edge. Downward dog. Also 3 breaths. Last one, and then inhale the left leg up behind you. Pause at minimum edge. And third inhale. Maximum edge. Exhale the left foot forward. Inhale the arms out in front. Exhale, tone the lower belly, draw energy into the shoulder sockets. Inhale, lengthen through the crown of the head. Exhale, minimum edge in the twist. Inhale, back out a little bit. Exhale, deepen the twist. Third exhale, full expression. Send more energy through the left hand so you're not leaning forward. Inhale, back to center. Exhale, step forward. Relax the back of the neck. Oops. 3 breaths to Uttanasana. Notice the tendency to lose awareness once you're done with the crown pose of any particular flow. And exhale, swim home. So it's difficult to be really present in the moment as you're moving into a difficult pose because you're rushing ahead. But it's probably even more difficult to be really present when you're coming out of a difficult pose because, again, your mind is rushing ahead to the easy thing you get to do next. Top of the mat. Let's just do a one-legged standing pose here. Lift your toes, spread them, extend them forward. I'm going to mirror you. Inhale your right leg up. And just hold it in position for a moment. And again, pause at minimum edge. Right? And then bring the knee a little bit higher. And a little bit higher. And then hold onto the shin. And free your breath some more. Broadening across the collarbones. And adding another stretch. And then place the foot into the inner calf. Okay, again, start lower. Start with level hips. And then take 2 more breaths, moving the foot higher. And you can avoid putting the foot on the inner knee, but unless you have real knee problems, I don't think that's actually necessary, even though that's a commonly stated, never ever put your foot on the inner knee. It's not as simple as that. And then float the arms out and up, again, pausing at minimum edge. So 3 more breaths here. And if you're not feeling a hip stretch at all, then you're probably misaligning your hips, lifting the hip of the lifted leg to avoid that stretch. You can do that in front of a mirror if you don't believe me. Lift the toes, spread them, extend them forward. Inhale the left leg up. Pause at minimum edge. Inhale, lift the leg a little bit higher. Notice the increasing stretch. Third inhale, lift a little bit higher. Hold on to the shin. Notice the collapsing here. And then free your breath. And then place the foot into the inner calf for now. and come into neutral hips. Put your hands on the hips so you can check that. Bring the foot higher, and then bring the foot even higher. Doesn't have to end up on the thigh. Wherever you find your maximum edge, that's where I want you to be. But move the hips towards neutral. Notice how that gives you a hip stretch you were previously avoiding. And then add the arm, shoulder stretch, fall over with a smile. 3 breaths to lifted arms. Enjoy each breath and step it down. Top of the mat. In, out. Float up. And yes, pause at minimum edge. Again, if you blow past it, but then you catch yourself, that's not a loss, that's a win. If you blow past it and you did notice, then that is a missed opportunity. Exhale, right leg steps back. And left leg steps back. Downward dog. Inhale your right leg up behind you, minimum edge. 2 more breaths. Exhale the right heel, the outside of the right hand. Again, pausing at minimum edge, which may require you to come onto fingertips or even put blocks under your hands and keep that front knee bent for now. Keep the hips relatively high, and then slowly allow the right foot to slide forward and that right leg to straighten as you bring the left knee down. You can point your left toes. Excuse me. Gradually deepening the stretch. Moving towards maximum. I'm going to take more like 5 or 6 breaths here rather than 3. And then curl the left toes under. Inhale. Lift the right leg up behind you again. Just 1 breath this time. Exhale the right heel to the outside of the left hand. Bring the left knee down. Again, pausing at minimum edge. Both knees bent. And then gradually sliding the foot farther. Straightening the front leg more. Freeing your breath. Right? Because one way to reduce the stretch intensity in the hips is to not free the breath, to compromise the breath. And return the hands to the floor, curl the left toes under. Inhale the right leg back up behind you. Optional vinyasa, optional 3-legged vinyasa. Non-optional 3 breaths to cobra. 3 breaths to downward dog. And then inhale the left leg up behind you, just to minimum edge. Exhale the left heel to the outside of the left hand off the mat. Right knee down. Keep the left knee bent for now. Come onto your fingertips or blocks, and then slowly move from minimum edge towards maximum. Don't forget to free the breath and notice how that dials up the hip stretch. Take your time. Free your breath some more. Take the forward bend out. Curl the right toes under. Inhale the left leg back up behind you. Just one breath here. Exhale the left heel to the outside of the right hand. Bring the right knee down. Again, pausing at minimum edge, maybe coming onto your fingertips or onto blocks, and then slowly moving towards maximum. Rolling the right hip forward, freeing your breath. Notice there are all kinds of things you can do with your core, with your torso to dial up the stretch. It's not just about getting the left foot farther forward. Curl the right toes under. Inhale the leg back up behind you. Optional vinyasa. Optionally, three-legged vinyasa. Non-optionally, 3 breaths to cobra. Downward dog. Inhale forward to plank. Exhale, send your heels back. Inhale, right knee towards the right elbow. Extend the leg back. Exhale, right knee to left elbow. Inhale, extend the leg back. Exhale, right knee to right elbow. Inhale back. Exhale, right knee to left elbow. And return to downward dog. Inhale forward to plank. Exhale, send your heels back. Lift the left leg and exhale the left knee to the left elbow. Inhale back. Exhale left knee to right elbow. One more time. Each side. And return to downward dog. And maybe rest and child for a couple of breaths. 3, 4, 5. Savor each breath. So we have a couple of more poses in store for you involving fairly large range of motion in the hips. From downward dog, inhale your right leg up behind you. Pause at minimum edge. Exhale the right foot forward. And then bring your right hand inside the right foot. And you start by lowering the hips and lowering the upper torso as well. Maybe bring your elbows onto a block or elbows on to the floor. But if you can't breathe with your elbows on the floor, then that's not the best place to put your elbows. Notice how freeing the breath dials up the hip stretch. Optionally, come back up onto your hands, turn the left foot out, bring the right arm underneath the right leg, and maybe come into the bind, and then free the breath. Because compromising the breath allows you to reduce the hip stretch. And then, very optionally, step the left foot forward, 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. And then inhale, come up onto that left foot. And the bind. Pause at minimum edge. Fall over with a smile. Free the breath before straightening that right leg. I'm still have work to do freeing that breath. I'm not going to straighten the leg today. Bring the foot back down. Step the left foot back. 1, 2, 3. Release the hands to the floor. Optional vinyasa. 3 breaths to cobra. And exhale. Downward dog. Inhale your left leg up. Minimum edge. To maximum, exhale, left foot forward, left hand inside the left foot. Deepen the hip stretch without compromising your breath, because compromising the breath doesn't deepen the hip stretch. It reduces it. Elbows to the floor if that's available. If not, don't worry about it. Focus on whether you're getting a good stretch or not and whether you can breathe. Inhale back onto your hands, turn the right foot out, bring the left arm underneath the left leg. And optionally, come into the bind here. Or you can just stay with that arm under the leg and the hands on the floor, and then step the right foot forward. 1, 2, 3. Inhale up. Pause at minimum edge without falling over or falling over with a smile. And then gradually dial up the stretch through a freeing of the breath before you even think about straightening the leg. Straightening the leg is not at all the only way to deepen the stretch. And maybe not straighten the leg at all. Bring the left foot back down, step the right foot back. 1, 2, 3. Release to plank. Optional vinyasa. Non-optionally, 3 breaths to cobra. And downward dog. Take another rest in child if you like. I'm going to add one more pose, which is Ekapada Kundinyasana 2, which is the non-twisted version. And usually the twisted version is called number 2. Here it's not, I think, because most people find the twisted version easier. It requires less hip range of motion, and it creates a more supportive, more efficient weight transfer, meaning you don't need as much muscle power. But we're going to do number 2. If you'd rather do number 1, feel free. If you'd rather do a different arm balance like crow, feel free. So here we go. Back to downward dog. Inhale your right leg up behind you. Lift your inner thigh. 3 breaths to maximum. Exhale the right foot forward. Bring your right arm underneath the right leg. Bring both hands in a little bit more. Bend the elbows, supporting your rib cage on the elbows. And then straighten that right leg a little bit to lift the foot off the floor. Shift your weight farther forward. Soften the back of the neck. Inhale forward. Breathe. And then return to plank. Optional vinyasa. And I'm skipping that one. Back to downward dog. Second side. Inhale the left leg up, minimum edge. Exhale the foot forward. Bring the left arm underneath the left leg. Bring the hands symmetrical. Bend the elbows. Rest the back of the thigh and the ribs, if you want, on the elbows. And then straighten that left leg. Relax the back of the neck. And now float forward. Exhale back to plank, optional vinyasa, downward dog, or straight to child. And I had a pretty intense upper body core workout yesterday, so I'm taking it a little bit easy today. So one way to take it easier in that pose is to have the back of the thigh supported on this elbow, but to have the rib cage supported on the other. It makes it a little bit more challenging to breathe, but it requires less strength. If you barely have the strength to hold yourself up with the elbow out, then that strength, that recruitment of that much muscle power is also going to compromise the breath. So you may actually have a freer breath by supporting the rib cage on the elbow. Okay. Let's go to the wall. And more minimum edges. What's this called? Standing splits. So facing away from the wall. Come into Uttanasana in 3 breaths. Pausing at minimum edge. And you may want more distance between you and the wall to start out with, so that you can pause at minimum edge in standing splits. Release the hands to the floor or to blocks if the floor is too far away. And then lift the right foot up behind you. Place the top of the foot on the wall and pause at minimum edge. And you may actually have to bend the standing leg to get to minimum edge, not blowing right past it in the standing leg's hamstrings. And then gradually straighten the standing leg. Slide the right foot a little bit higher. Maybe walk the left foot in a little bit closer to the wall and then walk the hands in as well. Notice how much you're lifting your right hip to get the foot higher without actually having to stretch. It's not about getting the foot higher, it's about getting a better stretch. So roll that right hip towards the floor. Notice how that dials up the stretch in the standing leg. Take your time. And again, gradually moving to maximum edge. Observe your breath. Can you still enjoy your breath? If not, consider the possibility that you've gone too far. And then come down and rest and shout. And then come back up to standing without using your hands, and come into another Uttanasana, pausing at minimum edge. Release the hands to the floor. And then inhale the left leg up behind you. Bring the top of the foot to the wall. Again, micro bend the right knee probably to really find minimum edge, and then gradually straighten the right leg and extend the left foot up the wall. Take your time. And don't forget to lower that left hip, so you're not actively avoiding the stretches. Notice how good we are at actively avoiding the stretches that we are actually setting out to do. Gradually
moving to maximum edge, and then release the left leg down. Come to child. Rest in child. Breathe.
Increased range of motion in standing splits is really helpful for coming up into inversions without having to kick up. The tighter your hips, the more momentum you have to create to get up into handstand or forearm balance. Don't ever kick up into headstand. But the more open your hips are in both directions, the more effortless it is to transition into these inversions. And so we'll play around with that a little bit, sort of garnering the benefits of having increased our range of motion in the hips. The other interesting side effect of moving into these hip stretches more slowly is that that actually allows you to go farther into them. It is a more effective way to increase your range of motion than to just jam right up against your maximum edge and stay there and hate life. So the slowing yourself down as you go into poses, especially as you go into stretches, is actually effective in terms of allowing you to go farther, which is a little counterintuitive because, right, in order to go farther, you feel like, well, I just need to barge ahead more. No, slowing yourself down allows your muscles to actually relax into the stretch. Okay, so we can start by kicking up, just to get into the swing of things. Either forearm balance or handstand. I'm going to do forearm balance. So come close to the wall, almost touching the wall with your fingertips. Curl your toes under. Lift your knees off the floor. Move your hips back. Come into a nice long downward dog or dolphin so that you have enough room to step one foot forward. And in stepping that foot forward, notice how I'm shifting my entire torso, minus the forearm, like my entire body, minus the forearms and the back foot forward. And that's what creates the momentum, which I then redirect by lifting the right leg to float up to the wall. This is much more effective than just swinging one leg wildly. So watch once. It's a 1-2 movement. 1, 2. Relax the back of the neck. Breathe. Come out. Stick one leg into the middle of the room. Let everything else follow. Come down to child. Don't skip child. So give that a go. And if this is child's play for you, then kick up with the other leg. If it's gotten so easy that you can do it in your sleep every time on your easy side, then it's time to start doing it on the not so easy side. Then you've got plenty to do to get the harder side to be just as effortless as the first one. If this is still really challenging, don't bother with the harder side. Just do the easy side. Moving from the breath. All right. And then you can do that again. Now, keep practicing that. Or if you want to challenge yourself a little bit more, we'll come and float up into the pose. That requires us to be in splits so that the leading leg can actually come in front of us and help send the center of gravity forward, thus eventually requiring no momentum, but that requires very open hips, like 180 degrees between the legs. Yeah, more or less. Without gravity pushing you into that 180 degrees, right? So that's actually quite extreme. So you probably still need a little momentum. And again, we're going to get that momentum from shifting the hips and thus the whole body forward and back. So watch once. I'm setting up about a leg distance between the wall and my elbows. Again, I'm doing this on my elbows. Come up into dolphin. Pause at minimum edge. Then come into more neutral spine and more neutral hips, dialing up the stretch. Then step 1 foot forward. Swing the other leg up, but I shouldn't say swing. Lift to minimum edge. And then go farther into splits until you hit maximum edge. And then start floating the hips back away from the wall and forward. Catch some air, float the hips back, float the hips forward to maybe come up into splits. You relax the back of the neck, no need to look at the floor. And then you could even play around with balancing there a little bit, or you can just play around with freeing your breath. Come down to child. Breathe, relax, and child. And again, if that is actually quite easy for you, then I suggest you try the other leg. And if that's easy, you're doing forearm balance, then maybe try handstand. Okay, I'm going to do the other leg. Can you remember which leg you did? It's another awareness practice. So again, pausing at minimum edge in dolphin, and stepping the other foot forward, lifting the other leg up, pausing at minimum edge, gradually straightening the standing leg and lifting the lifted leg higher, coming to maximum edge, and then shift the hips. Catch some air, land back on the foot, not a problem, just do it again, or come to the wall. And release back down to child. So these are all poses that really benefit from simultaneous deep flexion in one hip and deep extension in the other. And how much of that range of motion you really need for everyday life is debatable, probably not 180 degrees. But most of us are limited enough in hip range of motion that we actually get real benefits from increasing that range of motion. Again, you don't need to go to 180 for sort of general well-being benefits. All right. Let's do one strength edge move here. I promised them earlier this week. So far we've mostly been talking about stretch edge. I'm noticing the minimal stretches. So you can do the same thing with balance, noticing like the most minimal balancing challenge, which probably happens when you're sitting on the floor. That's a balancing challenge, but a very easy one. And the same thing with strength. You can notice where we first begin to really dial in a strength move. So measure our leg distance, which I didn't do. I'm just guessing here. Come to the wall with the soles, the big toe mounts touching the wall, hands on the floor. Again, you can do this on elbows. But if you're doing it on elbows, you can't walk in. So if you want to do more of the variations that I'm going to offer, you want to do this on your hands. Um, Curl the toes under, lift the knees off the floor, and notice that you blow right past minimum strength edge. So minimum strength edge is engaging as if you were going to lift your knees off the floor without actually getting them off the floor. And dial up that strength more until you can lift the knees off the floor. Move the hips back, and then you could step your feet onto blocks at the wall, which I didn't mention, or you could step onto, if there's a baseboard, you step onto that if it's reasonably wide, or you can step your feet up to hip height and keep the knees bent for now, and then notice that straightening the legs will dial up the strength challenge more. And then freeing your breath, taking out the banana back, dials up the strength challenge more. And then you can stay there. You can come down slowly. Or we can add one more variation, which is bringing the legs up above the hips and then walking the hands in to the wall, touching the wall with your nose, and then walking the hands forward again. So I'll demo that if you want to watch, or you can do it with me. Again, notice that you get to your minimum strength edge before you ever lift the knees off the floor. And go farther, take your time. Keep the knees bent with the feet on the wall. Then gradually straighten the legs, then free your breath. Notice how all that requires more strength. Then walk the feet up. And then walk your hands in. Use your core for that. Touch your nose to the wall. Walk the hands forward again, back to that L shape, and then come down with control. Come down to child. Rest, breathe, smile, all that good stuff. And then you can move the mat away from the wall. Roll down onto your back. So we'll do one more stretch, hip stretch. In the same sort of direction that we've been working on today. Extend the left leg along the floor, bring the right knee up towards the chest, and then rotate the knee out. Not all the way, not 90 degrees, but enough so your knee can clear the side of your rib cage. Slide the right hand to the ankle or to the outside edge of the right foot. And then slowly lift the sole of the foot towards the ceiling, pausing at minimum edge. Keep going until your shin is vertical. Once your shin is vertical, you want to go farther. Release the knee down. In order for you to do that, you may need to bring the knee out a little bit farther so you can clear not just your rib cage, but the edge of your hip socket. Because if you're jamming the neck of your femur into the edge of the hip socket, you're not accomplishing very much except damaging something you don't want to damage. Now, if you want to, I'm going to move the transmitter out of the way. If you want to take this farther, you can straighten that leg. But I no longer do that with the knee close to the floor because that can concentrate, and you can try it out gently. If you Begin to straighten the leg with the knee close to the floor. For me, that concentrates the stretch at the sit bone, and that's dangerous. So instead, if you want to straighten the leg straight up towards the ceiling, which requires you to lift your shoulders and your head off the floor. Take the hand to the inner heel, and then deepen the stretch by bringing the shoulders and the head back to the floor. And notice that the stretch now is more behind the knee, which is much safer, or in the belly of the hamstring muscles, which is also safe or safer. Nothing is safe, right? But lots of things are safer than some other things. Take your time moving from minimum to maximum edge. And this, like taking the torso off the floor momentarily as you straighten the leg, helps you really start at minimum edge. Enjoy each breath. Relatively neutral hips, so your breath is not too compromised. And then exhale, slowly bend the right knee and release the stretch. Come back to the center. Pause in mini shavasana. Observe the two sides of the body. Energize your legs. Bring the feet parallel. Bring the left knee up to the chest. Rotate the knee out. Slide the left hand to the ankle or the outside edge of the foot. Pause here. Minimum edge. Knee flexed almost completely, or maybe all completely. And then begin to dial up the stretch by lifting the sole of the foot towards the ceiling by slowly extending the knee joint to about 90 degrees, depending on how high your knee is off the floor. It's not about 90 degrees, it's about maintaining a vertical shin or moving towards that vertical shin. And once you're there, then maintaining it. Because as your knee releases farther down to the floor, you'll actually go back. Your knee will flex more than 90 degrees from fully extended. Again, more neutral hips, more core engagement. Notice how that's very effective at dialing up the hip stretch in the left leg, left inner thigh. And how it frees your breath at the same time, meaning you're better able to enjoy the stretch. And then if you want to move to the straight-legged variation, don't straighten the leg with the knee close to the floor. I think it's too dangerous, but maybe just for me. So if you want to straighten the leg, straighten it almost straight up towards the ceiling. And again, lifting the shoulders and the head off the floor so you can really start at minimum edge here. And then gradually releasing the shoulders and the head down, and thus increasing the stretch intensity in the back of the left leg. Take your time, pausing as you inhale, relaxing into the stretch, gradually deepening it. Creating more neutral hips. Noticing if one side is tighter than the other and just letting that be. Just noticing it. Don't try to force the same opening on the tighter side. It's a great way to get injured. But one way to balance out unequal range of motion, release out of the stretch, mini shavasana, is to do the stretch, the pose twice on the tighter side, but on both sides only going to maximum edge. So it means you're going twice on the tighter side, but you're not going as far either time. Breathe. Observe your breath. Enjoy each breath. And then bring both knees into the chest if you like. Massage your lower back. Roll up to sitting. Plant your feet in front of you. Plant your hands behind you. Now, this is another strength edge, but also a stretch edge. You'll probably encounter the strength edge first, unless your shoulders are super tight. So again, I'm going to lift the sit bones off the floor, and again, you'll get to minimum strength edge before the sit bones actually come off the floor, just engaging to prepare to lift the hips. Takes you to your minimum edge for strength, and then move farther, actually lifting the hips off the floor. Pause. As you exhale, inhale, lift the heart more than the hips. And notice that you now begin to move into a shoulder stretch. Move to maximum edge slowly in the shoulder stretch as well. Still enjoying each breath. And release. Pause. Do that again, or do it with straight legs, which will increase the strength challenge, but decrease the stretch challenge. Again, engage gently as if you're about to lift off, and that be it. That's your minimum strength edge. And then on the next inhale, maybe actually lift off. And then on the next inhale, float your breastbone up higher. Start to feel the stretch edge. Minimum stretch edge, and then move towards maximum, both in terms of strength and in terms of stretch. And release and roll back down onto your back and bring the knees into the chest if you like. Plant your feet close to your sit bones but wider. Feet parallel. Set up for bridge. Exhale, tone your lower belly. And again, inhale, strength edge, engaging as if you were going to lift your hips off without actually lifting them off. Next inhale, actually lift your hips and your lower back and your middle back. Move your shoulders more underneath you and release your hands behind the back if you like. And then rather than pressing the hips as high as you can get them, focusing on strength, let the hips settle down and lift your heart, focusing more on stretch and on freeing the breath and on actually making this pose enjoyable. And release back down. One major feature of this pose is actually getting a back bend going in the upper back. And again, that's something we're really good at avoiding. Because in most other back bends, you can quite easily do most of it in the lower back and in the neck. Here, you really can't do it in the neck. You can only do it in the lower back if you push your hips as high as they'll go. If you let the hips settle down, then you're compelling yourself to back bend in the upper back through that lifting of the breastbone. Come up one more time. Again, observe your strength minimum edge. Notice that that happens before the hips come off the floor. Next inhale, lift the hips in the lower back. Get your shoulders more underneath you. Interlace your hands behind the back if you like. Pause as you exhale. Inhale. Lift the breastbone more. Pause, let the hips settle down. Relax the glutes a little bit. Inhale, lift your heart more. Intentionally creating a back bend in the upper back, creating a stretch where we're good at avoiding it, moving to maximum in that
upper torso stretch. And then if you want, lift one leg off the floor, straighten that leg to add another stretch, hamstring stretch, but don't lose the stretch in the upper torso. Bring the leg back down, lift the other one. And release. All the way back down to the floor. Bring the knees into the chest if you like, or flop into a mini Shavasana. Bring your arms out to the sides. Bring your feet back to the floor, close to the sit bones. Not super close, but reasonably close. So you can press the feet into the floor to lift your hips off the floor. Go ahead and do that now, and move your hips to the left. Bring them back down to the floor. Inhale, lift your feet, bring your knees above your hips. Shins parallel, knees parallel. And exhale the knees to the right, keeping them aligned with each other if you want to make this more challenging. And again, notice that there is a strength edge, minimum strength edge, before you get to a minimum stretch edge. Pause for both, and then gradually move deeper. And as you approach maximum stretch edge, you want to make the maximum strength edge disappear. And so if you get to maximum stretch edge, when your knees, your thigh is still off the floor, then you're doing both. You're at stretch edge and at strength edge, and that's a lot of work. So feel free to put a cushion under the outer right knee so that you can let go of the strength problem and just focus on the stretch problem. It's not the only way to do it, but it's one very effective way to increase range of motion here. So that's relaxing into the stretch is more helpful if you really want to focus on increasing range of motion. If you have plenty of range of motion and you just feel unstable, then actually the more effective variation is keeping the legs off the floor, even if you can get them to the floor, and building strength there. Whatever variation is more effective is the one that is less pleasant, less easy, that doesn't play to your existing I'm looking for the advantages. I'm looking for a better word. Your existing proclivities, tendencies. Inhale slowly, smoothly back to center. Again, notice that you get to your minimum strength edge before the thigh ever lifts off the floor. Touch your feet down, lift your hips, move your hips over to the right side of your mat, lift the knees above the hips, keep the knees together as you exhale the knees to the left, pause at minimum strength edge, then pause at minimum stretch edge, and gradually move towards maximum. Maximum strength edge happens just before the left thigh touches down. Maximum stretch edge happens after you've released the leg down, possibly. Or maybe not. Maybe it happens early, because now you can relax into it. And relaxing into the stretch diminishes the stretch. Last exhale. Inhale, slowly, smoothly back to center. Touch your feet down. Lift your hips. Move your hips way over to the right. Lift the knees above the hips, shins to horizontal, or if you prefer, shins to vertical. Straighten the knees. Exhale the legs to the right. If you are doing straight legs, you can Aim the right foot into the right hand. Take your time. Relax into the stretch. Inhale back to center. Slowly, smoothly, again, noticing that you get to your minimum strength edge long before the legs actually start lifting. Touch the feet down, move the hips way over to the right, and lift your legs. Again, your option, knees bent or knees extended. Exhale the legs to the left. Inhale, slowly, smoothly, back to center. One more time. Since I didn't instruct stopping at minimum edge the second time around, which is harder with straight legs, right? So if you're doing straight legs again, go ahead. If not, that's fine. I'll straighten the legs to vertical. Yeah, there's some engagement to hold the legs there, but as you begin to move the legs to the right, notice, again, probably the strength, minimum edge first, then the stretch, minimum edge. Take your time. Move into the pose really slowly, which is incredibly difficult because holding yourself up against gravity that requires a lot of power. And that's more beneficial than just rushing to the end point because it actually builds really useful strength. And again, inhaling up slowly actually builds more strength than inhaling up fast. Bend your knees, touch your feet down, lift your hips, move your hips to the right. Lift the feet. Straighten the legs if you want. Exhale the legs to the left. Pause at minimum strength edge. Pause at minimum stretch edge. And then don't go straight to maximum. Take a few more breaths along the way here. Again, noticing that you approach your maximum strength edge as you slow down the movement before you get to the end point, and then you get to your maximum stretch edge at the end point. So if you want to build more strength, you want to slow yourself down more, spend more time along the way, less time at the end point where you can almost completely relax. Unless you're intentionally keeping the legs off the floor, in which case you can't relax. Or if you just don't have the range of motion to get the leg all the way down, you can put a cushion under it, and then you can still relax. And now back to center. Touch your feet down. Lift your hips, moving back to center. Draw the knees into the chest. Hug them in. Massage your lower back. Roll up to sitting. Nice and slow. Baddha Konasana. Start at minimum edge, which again probably means a rounded back, and then gradually move from minimum edge. Or maybe you're avoiding the stretch entirely. Move to minimum edge by rolling your hip crest forward, feeling the first inkling of a stretch, then roll your hip crest forward a little bit more, and a little bit more, until, and I have a tendency to overarch my middle back here. So you can do it more in the lower back, roll the hip crest forward without over engaging the upper back. There, that's a little bit better. And then add a forward bend without collapsing, without compromising your breath. So start the forward bend in the hips,
Roll the hip crest forward some more, and then gradually let the lower back and the middle back and the upper back and the neck all bend forward a little bit. Notice whether you're maintaining neck tension. If you are, then you're not really forward bending. You're doing a hunchback. You're tensing the back of the neck in order to collapse the front of the chest so you can get your head farther without having to actually increase the hip stretch. Since this is designed to be a hip stretch and a calming pose, you're destroying both of those effects. By tensing the back of the neck, you're stressing yourself out, thus destroying the calming effects of this pose, and you're quite actively avoiding the hip stretch, really rendering the pose not just useless, but actually detrimental. Because if you're doing this with neck tension, all you're really doing is practicing how to do a deeper hunchback. Pulse with the breath, moving from minimum edge to maximum edge. Noticing that freeing the breath helps you go farther towards maximum edge, even if it doesn't let you get your head closer to the floor. Last exhale. Inhale, walk your hands back up. Use your hands to lift your knees, extend your legs out in front. Come into Dandasana. Free your breath. Exhale, lift your hands, engage your lower belly, intentionally round your lower back, roll down with a rounded back. Come into Shavasana. Snuggle the shoulder blades in towards the spine to help open the front of the chest in a way that doesn't require ongoing muscle contraction. And surrender into the floor. If your mind wanders, bring it back to the breath. If your mind wanders, bring it back to the breath. Savor each breath. Just like minimum edge, Shavasana is about tuning in to really subtle sensations to keep yourself anchored in the here and now. Your breath or the contact between your skin and the floor. And again, the sensations in Shavasana hopefully are all rather subtle. Move your fingers, move your toes. Pause at minimum edge. You first feel a stretch sensation and then increase the movement in the fingers and toes, and then roll over onto one side. Notice the temptation to rush ahead to seated pose and then disrupt that tendency. Tune into the breath, tune into the here and now, letting go of this obsession with the future. And when the time is right, mindfully come back to a seated pose, anchoring your mind in this moment in time, in each moment in time as you transition. Noticing your minimum edges, both in terms of strength and stretching, sitting on a cushion. So you can free your breath in seated pose without having to deal with an intense stretch sensation, because it's 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 an easy pose. It's supposed to be comfortable. Inhale, float your arms out and up, pausing at minimum edge. Again, noticing if you get better at noticing that first inkling of a stretch sensation a little bit earlier, full expression of the pose, and then exhale your hands to your heart. Let's end with one Om. Take a slow, delicious inhale. May all beings everywhere be free from suffering. Thank you for practicing with me. I hope you have a wonderful day.